Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Controversial Issues with Rabbi Chaim Coffman from the Holy Land. Checkmate, Coffman. Here we go. We managed to squeeze it in. There you are. That's going to cost you about $50 now. So.
At least how much is a good bottle of scotch? Right? At least 100.
Exactly. You know what? You're right. You owe me $100.
Okay, it's coming. PayPal. You look out for it.
All right. Sounds good to me. Oh boy! Wow. Well, welcome back. Don't smoke crack. We're going to cover. We're going to discuss part 2. Why do the rabbis argue? They can't seem to agree on anything. We've heard that thing: 2 rabbis, 3 opinions. Maybe we should talk about that too.
You want to talk about that first, or
yeah, I heard a good explanation for it. It wasn't at all like it seems, but I'd rather you tell it. So tell us what it's all about.
All right, I guess we'll start there. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure as usual. It's an interesting phenomenon that 2 people come. Let's say 2 people come and ask a rabbi a question. Whatever that question's going to be. Now, for that one person, he could get a certain answer, and another person get a different answer. Now, you're going to say, why did he answer? I mean, it's a little bit different, but we'll get there, right? Why he's going to answer different to the different people, the question's the same. So that 100% is true, except for one thing. There's always a but, and the caveat is, it depends who's asking the question. In other words, if someone comes and, someone's, stronger spiritually than someone else, or there are other circumstances, a rabbi can say, no, for you, it should be like this because maybe you're not holding where you should be. Or for someone else, maybe, you should hold like this, right? Maybe you should be doing this. So a rabbi can give a different answer to the same question. That's certainly not a contradiction because, again, you have to answer the question according to the way the person asked it, right? So, I heard her say, if you don't speak in their language, they're not going to understand, right? So when you have someone, you're going to ask a question, right? You're going to ask the same question to 2 different rabbis or 3 different rabbis, let's say. You ask a question. Now, there are a lot of things within Torah law, within the code of Jewish law. There are a lot of things that are cut and dry, right? What's the blessing over a peach? Bray Priates grows from a tree. That's cut and dry, right? An apple, same thing, right? There are certain things that are cut and dry. There are certain things could be difference of opinion, right? In other words, there could be a difference of opinion among the rabbis, whether we go one way or the other. Now, you're going to ask, how can that be? Because the question itself, there are different facets. Right? A person has to realize when a question is asked, it could be a clear-cut question. We're not saying the question's in doubt. We're saying that there are various opinions. Now, not all opinions, even according to the Talmud, according to the earlier commentators, later commentaries, not everything 100% is going to go according to what the Talmud says. There might be a number of ramifications. Now, I spoke yesterday, giving a class on Derech Hashem and the way of God. At the end, he speaks about oral law, right? You never get away from oral law, right? And one of the things he said was, even if you have a disagreement, in the Talmud, but the Talmud says this is what we hold, but there's a difference of opinion, it doesn't negate the fact that the law is the law. You might say, oh, come on, we want a clear cut. We want it 100%. We want everyone to agree. Well, not necessarily everyone agrees, but what's the problem? The problem is maybe it doesn't look as good, right? Maybe you're going to say, wow, not everyone agrees. So if not everyone agrees, it's a little bit tainted. Even though the Talmud says, yeah, there's a disagreement, but, in the end, this is what we do. Right? So the example I gave is that the Talmud says there's a disagreement between the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai for 13 years. Imagine, 13 years they're arguing back and forth. What was the question? Good thing for this week's Torah portion about the beginning of creation, right? What does the beginning of creation speak about? Creation of man. So at the end of the Parsha, we'll cut to the chase. God says, I have remorse. I have regret I created man. So the question, how can God have remorse? Right? If he knows the past, present, future, he knows. So why is he having remorse? Good question, not for now. Right? But God created man. But doesn't God know man's going to sin? Yeah, God knows that. So the question is, what were the House of Hill and Shammai arguing about? 100% they're arguing about whether it's a good thing for man to be created or not. So back and forth. Yes, no. Imagine. It didn't happen over a couple hours. This went on for years. Brought different proofs. They rejected the proofs. Brought other proofs. Rejected. Not. Hashed out. 13 years. What was the conclusion? So the Gemara cuts to the chase. The Gemara says that in the end, they agreed the House of Hill, the House of Shammai, man shouldn't have been created. But the fact that man was created, okay? You know, when they do bad things, they have to look into their actions. They have to be better people, right? But in the end, they agreed. So even though there's disagreement, in this case, you had disagreement for 13 years, right? But even though there's disagreement, there's a conclusion. Sometimes the conclusion is you have to wait for Elijah the prophet. Sometimes the Talmud will say, we have a doubt, we can't answer. Other times, they'll say it's a doubt, and what do? If it's a Torah obligation, then what do? We're stringent because we don't want to go against the Torah. If it's a rabbinic obligation, whatever the obligation is, we're more lenient, right? That is a Talmudic dictum. So that being the case, so if there's a doubt or if there are different ramifications, you can have a certain case where there are a lot of different factors. So therefore, one opinion could be like this, a second opinion could be like that, and a third opinion could be different. So now someone's going to ask the $1 million questions. How do you know what to do? Right? So if a person knows how to learn, they'll look it up. They'll see there's a difference of opinion. And if they know enough, they'll see what people do. Right? They'll see what the common custom is. And they'll do X, Y, or Z. So others may say, well, in this circumstance, even though the halakha is like this, since we have other ramifications, for you it applies like this. For someone else, it might apply different. You're going to say, but again, even according to the code of Jewish law, isn't it concrete? Don't we know what to do? So again, there are ramifications. That's one question. If there are different ramifications. The other question is if there are doubts, not ramifications, doubts. Now the question is, what's the doubt? Right? Am I stringent? Am I not stringent? Right? I'll give one example. The Talmud says we have a major doubt on the 8th day of Sukkot. What's the 8th day of Sukkot that we just passed? In the land of Israel, it's only one day, so you have Simchas Torah, right? You dance with the Torah. Well, this year was a little bit different, right? We still dance with the Torah, and it's called Shmini Atzeres. Really, the holiday is called Shmini Atzeres. Now, outside of Israel, there are 2 days, right? There's Shmini Atzeres. It's really a separate holiday. It's not really part of Sukkot. And it's not exactly true, but we'll see. And then you have the next day, the day after, at night is Simchas Torah. Now, why do I say it's still part of the holiday of Sukkot or not? Because is there an obligation to sit in the sukkah? The Torah tells me you gotta live in a sukkah, right? So you gotta celebrate it 7 days, right? But we know outside of Israel there are 2 days, right? The first days are 2 days. The last days are 2 days. In Israel, it's 1 day, right? All had to do with sending out witnesses and seeing the moon, and all that. But now the calendar's been fixed. So outside of Israel, they still hold 2 days because they hold one opinion is because of the doubt our forefathers had, whether it's going to be 1 day or 2 days. So, we'll give that reason. That's reason enough. And they have 2 days. Now, the question of 2 days over here. So what's the last day? Is the last day part of Sukkot? It's really a separate holiday. The question is, Talmud asks, do I sit in the sukkah? Am I allowed to sit in the sukkah? Well, is it part of Sukkot or not? So there's a major doubt, the whole discrepancy. So what's the compromise? The Talmud says the compromise is you sit in the sukkah, you don't make the blessing. In other words, you can eat in the sukkah, right, at night and during the day. You don't sleep in the sukkah. You eat in the sukkah, but you don't make the blessing. You don't make the blessing over the sukkah. Now you're going to say, why not? Because there's a doubt. I have a doubt over here. So since we're not sure, it's a Torah obligation. So I'm stringent. I don't make the blessing. Right? I don't, or say, sorry, it's going to be rabbinic. I don't make the blessing. Right? But also I don't sleep in the sukkah because again, it's doubtful. So in that case, there's a major discrepancy. Back and forth. It is a doubt. It's not a doubt. Whatever. In the end, it's a doubt. It's a clear-cut doubt. But if it's a doubt, what do I do? What in the world do I do? So what people do outside of Israel, most people, they sit in the sukkah if it's not raining, and they don't make the blessing. They don't make the blessing over the sukkah. They make the blessing over wine, make the blessing, over bread. They will not make the blessing over the sukkah itself. So you have a doubt. You have a major doubt, over here. And since it's rabbinic, so we're going to be lenient in some ways. We're going to be stringent in other ways. But on the books, that's the halacha. Now, if you ask any rabbi, you're not going to have a discrepancy here, right? They will tell you this is the norm. This is what the normative law is. So that being the case, okay, right? You're not going to have any discrepancy. What about sleeping in the sukkah? There is an opinion. Right? There is an opinion. The Vilna Gaon says you sleep in the sukkah as well on Shmini Atzeres. Now, he's a minority. He's a minority opinion. So I always tell everyone that when I lived in New Jersey, and my Rebbe, Moshe Sternbuch, should be well. He is an 8th-generation descendant from the Vilna Gaon, right? More than 250 years ago, through his mother, direct descendant through his mother. And I asked him, what do I do? I'm living in Lakewood now, in New Jersey. What do I do about sleeping in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres? So he says, the Vilna Gaon holds, you're allowed to. So I said, well, the custom is people don't do it here. Right? That's not the custom there. So I said, if I'm a student of an 8th-generation, grandchild, the Vilna Gaon says, yeah, you can sleep there. He said, you can also sleep there, but 2 out of the 3 years it rained. So it didn't matter. Right? It was really a moot point, right? But again, if you have your own personal Rebbe also, he may tell you to do things that maybe not everyone's going to do, right? Even if this is the norm, right? That's not out of the realm of halacha, right? Because over here, what are you saying? The Vilna Gaon holds such a position. He's not a slouch. He doesn't need me to see that, to say that. He would have been great in the time of Rashi, right? Torah, one of the unbelievable giants of Torah. He knew the Talmud backwards, not forwards. He knew it forwards also, but to know it backwards, we don't understand who this person was, right? So the Vilna Gaon says you can do that, but okay, how many people are going to hold like the Vilna Gaon and go against everyone else? Not too many, right? So someone asked me about Shmini Atzeres, and I said, yeah, I'm going to try and sleep in the sukkah. They said, nobody sleeps in the sukkah. I said, not nobody. He said, yeah, but that's only the Vilna Gaon's opinion. I said, you're right. That's his opinion. But my Rebbe is an Eidelkel. He's a relative, 8th generation to the Vilna Gaon. Right? So for most people, what's the answer? The answer is you don't sleep in the sukkah. Right? That's the answer. On the 8th day, you don't sleep in the sukkah. You eat in the sukkah. You don't make the blessing over the sukkah. You don't sleep. You don't sleep in the sukkah. But again, I had a personal question. Right? And according to the majority, you don't sleep in the sukkah. Right? But there is an opinion. You're allowed to. Right? So when I asked him, he said you're allowed to, but I'm not sure he would tell everyone that. Right? He might say, do what you want. This is what the Vilna Gaon holds. Right? But I asked him, I want to sleep in the sukkah the last night. This is what the Gaon holds. Am I allowed to do it? He said, yeah. He might not have told everyone that, but that's what he told me. Right? So in general, if it's something that, even if it's clear cut, there may be some other nuances going on where someone asks the question for everybody else and for the majority. This is what the law is. For you, we'll bend the rules a little bit for X, Y, or Z, but you can't just bend the rules. Someone's not just going to bend the rules for nothing, right? It has to be something substantial because you're going to say, come on, you can't go according, you have to go according to the majority, right? Book of Exodus, chapter 23, verse 2. You go according to the majority for good. They're going to say, but you wanted to sleep in the sukkah, on the 8th day, and nobody does that outside of Israel. I said, but I have a Rebbe, right? I have a personal Rebbe. Now, you're right. The majority of people don't do that. But I had a desire. I wanted to sleep in the sukkah, right? So he said, okay, you're allowed to. So you can have something clear cut, but you can have other, I just want to point out, you can have other factors involved where the halacha could change. Now, the difference is, this is a good segue, because the difference is someone's going to say, you're going against the norm. You're not allowed to go against the norm. This is the majority. The majority says you don't do it. I didn't transgress anything. Right? Maybe according to them, they'll say, since it's a doubt, we don't do that. But do I transgress a Torah prohibition of adding on? Right? What is adding on? You're not allowed to add or subtract to the Torah. What is adding on? The classic case is I put extra parchment in my tefillin, or I add extra tzitzis, or I take one off. That's adding or subtracting. So over here, if a person sleeps in the sukkah, when technically it's really not sukkahs, even though you're sitting there, you're eating there, but you're not sleeping there making the blessing. So it sort of is like sukkahs. It sort of isn't like sukkahs. So the question is that called baltosis? Is that called I'm adding on or not? Right? So since, the other side might say it's a separate day, even though you're sitting in the sukkah, you're not allowed to sleep. Right? That's going too far. Right? The Vilna Gaon didn't hold like that. He held you're still allowed to. Right? So why do I say it's a good segue? It's a good segue because you're in the parameters of Torah. When you're within the parameters of Torah, then 100%, you go to the left a little bit, the right a little bit, but you're within the parameters. If you're outside the parameters, I mentioned this last week, right? Maybe I got carried away, but I mentioned last week, spoke about Reform. We spoke about conservative. They're outside the parameters. Why are they outside the parameters? Because they don't hold the Torahs from God. It's a committee, 4 authors, a redactor, whatever it is, documentary hypothesis. They believe that it's divinely inspired. Okay, but you're not arguing on the same level. So if you're not arguing on the same level, so what I said, and now it might sound a little bit harsh, it might sound maybe like I'm a racist, but we don't care what the Reform or conservatives say. We don't care. They're out of the parameters. I'm not saying they're not Jews. If they converted, it's a problem. It's a problem. We don't recognize their conversions because again, they don't hold Jewish law like they need to. So we're not saying that, we're not saying they're not Jews, but we're saying they're out of the parameters when they pick and choose. You're not allowed to pick and choose. We've mentioned this many times. So that being the case, okay, we have to understand where they're coming from, right? We went through the history. We understand where they started. Now, as the English say, they'll probably like this, right? Anyone who's English is listening. Now it gets a little bit dicey. How does it get a little bit dicey? It gets a little bit dicey because now what about the ultra Orthodox? What about modern Orthodox, Chabad, open Orthodoxy, ultra Orthodox? Right? What about all these different groups? How do they fall in over here, and why is there such disagreement? Why is there such disagreement between them? Isn't it true, even by the modern Orthodox? I'm not going to include open Orthodox because they're not really Orthodox, but we'll get to them. Isn't it true, even with Sephardic, Ashkenazic, Hasidic, isn't it true? 97% or 98% of everything in the Torah, we all agree. We all agree Torah's from heaven. We all agree you got to put on tefillin. We all agree you got to say the Shema. We all agree you got to keep kosher. You got to pray. We don't disagree. Okay, some people have different customs, right? Sephardic people have some different customs. Hasidic people have different customs, but we're not arguing necessarily in philosophy. In general, I'm going to get to what the arguments are, but in general, we'll make it very easy. There are different customs that they have. Certainly when it comes to Passover, certainly, the order of prayer, different things, but that doesn't take them out of the parameters. If it anything that takes the person out of the parameters, okay, that's a whole different issue, right? We're not going to argue that point. We argued that last week. So where are the differences? Where are the differences? So we'll start with open Orthodoxy. That's the easiest. they've made a whole bunch of statements. They call themselves open because they don't want to call themselves modern because they want to necessarily associate with them. They're the left, right? They're to the left of modern orthodoxy. We'll explain what that means in a second. They're so far to the left. They're more like conservative or reform. Why do I say that? Because they make statements. They make statements like, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't a good leader. God forbid, right? Seen some of their rabbis, quote unquote, make such a statement. Or the fact that Abraham failed. That's what I think we ended with last week. Abraham failed the Akedah, right? The binding of Isaac, and God failed. And all these different things that go against what the Torah says. Same-sex marriages. They won't have gay rabbis in their school, but same-sex marriages they'll allow. They'll allow them to be in their congregations, right? Homosexuality. What do you do with Leviticus chapter 18? Good question. Very good question. So for them, I don't necessarily have an issue except for the fact they're more like Reform and conservative. They want to call themselves Orthodox, major problem, right? But so you're going to say, okay, if they're more like Reform and conservative, okay, so I know that. Right now I understand it. And if I understand it, I'll stay away from them. But there's a problem. What's the problem? The problem is they're infiltrating Orthodox synagogues. They claim to be Orthodox, but their philosophy does not fit. They go to end extremes to do things that certainly not only forbidden, they're turning the Torah into a pretzel. They're not just saying we're going to bring Torah into the modern world. They want to do things 100% provocative, and to show that, yeah, we still call ourselves Orthodox. It's a major problem. I wouldn't care at all. I wouldn't care at all if they would say, I'm not Orthodox, right? If they claim they're conservative or Reform, okay, right? I'll blend them all together because there's not that much difference. But the fact that you want to call yourself Orthodox, you want to teach people how to learn, you want to do other things, you want to infiltrate the Orthodox community, that 100% is a danger. That we cannot tolerate. And these people shouldn't be in these positions because, they are misleading people, right? They are totally misleading people. Of course we're Orthodox. How can you be Orthodox if you believe in homosexuality? They don't jive, right? How can you be Orthodox and say, Abraham missed the boat? What, how can the chief rabbi of England, we're going to get to him also, right, which we mentioned, how can he say that in Orthodox, in yeshivas in England, they should, it's okay to learn about homosexuality? I don't care if you got a political job. You're a Jew. You're an Orthodox Jew. You are the chief rabbi. If you're the chief rabbi, for goodness sakes, what are people going to say? See, Orthodoxy allows homosexuality. That's a desecration of God's name. Not literal definition, but that's a desecration of God's name. Why is it a desecration? Very simple, because people are going to say, look, he's Orthodox. And he believes in that. So that's what the Orthodox believe. Yeah, that's what he believes. Or that's maybe what Open Orthodoxy believes. That's not what everyone else believes. Right? That's certainly not what the other Orthodox believe. Not what what Hasidim believe. Not what Sephardic people believe. Right? The ones that are truly Orthodox, of course they don't believe that. Right? So that's misleading. But again, it's worse because he's in a position of power. And he's in a position where he represents English Jewry. Right? Even though the rabbis there don't think very much of him, it's a political position and all that. Okay. I get it. I understand. The problem is what he represents. So, okay, we'll knock off, Open Orthodoxy. We're not going to take them, we're not going to take them seriously. I'll give one example. Give another example. Because I just saw recently there was a letter by the Rosh Hashiva of Ner Yisrael, Rav Aaron Feldman. He should be well. That there was a open Orthodox rabbi, again, open Orthodox rabbi, and on Yom Kippur, I think it was on Yom Kippur, that they had a service via Zoom, right? It was either Yom Kippur or Shabbos, whatever it was. They live streamed a service on Zoom. So again, if you're a conservative rabbi, Reform rabbi, I have no issues. They're going to do it anyway. They use electricity. They'll drive. They'll do all kinds of things. They don't know how to keep Shabbos anyway. Okay. But you claim to be Orthodox. How in the world can you have a quote-unquote Orthodox synagogue via Zoom on Shabbos, on Yom Kippur, right? On Rosh Hashanah, on any time, on any festival, that you're not allowed to quote-unquote do any work. So he wrote a scathing letter against him, saying basically, in my language, you're off your cotton picking head. What in the world are you doing? How in the world can you think that's permissible? So in my language, they're out, right? That's, you're going to say, okay, maybe it's, let's say they put on the computer before, and maybe they're not going to touch it. The screen's not going to go off, and it's only rabbinical. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's still forbidden. Using a microphone's also a problem, in synagogue on Shabbos or a festival. Why? I mean, there are many reasons why. One reason is because even if you hear the Torah reading through it, you're not hearing it from the person. You're hearing it, vibrate from the microphone, right? So it's a problem. Can I, just as a side point, could I hear anything that I have to fulfill an obligation, let's say in prayer, hearing the Torah or blessings, let's say hearing the shofar, right? This comes up. Can I hear the shofar over the phone? Can I hear the shofar over Zoom? Same question. And the answer is you're not hearing the ultimate thing. You're hearing it through another thing. That's not the true sound. Sounds like it. I agree. 100%. It sounds like it. But it's not, because it's reverberating around, this microphone. So good. So we'll knock them out. Now, what's the deal with Modern Orthodox? Now, Modern Orthodoxy, there are different streams. Some are very strong, very stringent, and a lot of them, whatever. And there are others, I want to say percentages, there are others that are not. Now, what's the difference in philosophy between the Modern Orthodox and the Outer Orthodox? There's a difference in philosophy. There's a difference in dress, right? We'll get to dress. Dress is easy, right? If you're an Outer Orthodox Jew, you're going to wear a white shirt, black pants with or without pinstripes, dark blue with or without pinstripes, and gray, right? That's it. Very easy to get dressed. Why? Dark colors. What does it represent? Humility. We're not wearing bright things. So again, white shirts and whatever else you wear, a jacket, wear a hat, etc. In the Modern Orthodox community, you'll see people in brown shirts. You'll see people with, khaki pants. They're not wearing white and black. White and black or white and blue, whatever it is. So now you're going to say, does it really matter what people wear? No, it's external. But the point is that if you want to identify with the community, so, if it's a black hat community, that's how you're going to dress. Otherwise, you're going to stick out. In a Modern Orthodox community, you can wear what you want. You're not going to stick out. You want to wear pants like you're going golfing, like green, bright green pants. Okay. People do that. Maybe not, maybe yes. But there's a difference in dress. Now, I'm not big in externals, but I do understand how people look at someone the way they're dressed, right? I don't think it's right, because you can have people that are tremendously religious, but they just don't dress the part, right? They like to dress more casual, whatever it is, but that they don't want to conform to that, but they're very strict in many other ways, okay? Right? But, people are very quick to judge by how a person looks. So that's one thing. Second thing where they're going to differ is in philosophy. Now again, there are going to be different levels. There are going to be different levels. Some are much stronger, some are not. And the idea is that, in the Modern Orthodox world, many people, if you would ask the parents, and you would ask them, okay, what do you want your son to be? What do you want your son to be when he grows up? What's the answer going to be? A doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, architect, fill in the blank. Out of the top 20 answers, right? We'll go on Family Feud. Top 20 answers, right? The 25th answer or 50th answer is, I want my son to be a rabbi. So you're going to say you're exaggerating. I don't think I'm exaggerating. The vast majority of modern Orthodox parents do not want their kids to be a rabbi. That being said, secular studies, I'm not saying Shabbos isn't important to them. I'm not saying festivals are not important to them. What's important to them as well is secular studies, having a degree, right? Or, having a profession. So you're going to say, what? Ultra-Orthodox Jews don't have a profession? Many do. But the emphasis by a lot of them is not in learning. How do you distinguish what makes somebody in the Orthodox world something special? How much he knows, how much Talmud he knows, how much Jewish law he knows, right? His level of humility. You say, what, knowledge is everything? Let me tell you the following story. A number of years ago, here in Israel, Chief Rabbinate, they brought up and they confirmed 22 rabbinic court judges. They had 22 new rabbinic court judges. Out of the 22, 15 came out of the ultra-Orthodox community. Now you can say, oh, it's discrimination. What about the religious Zionists? And the religious Zionists not that much different than the modern Orthodox. We'll speak about that in a second. And you had 15 out of 22. Discrimination, you'll tell me this, that. What is the percentage? 58%. Why is the percentage so strong, towards the ultra-Orthodox? It's because their main focus is learning. Day in and day out, that's their focus. Right now, if they have to work and they have to provide for their families, okay. But the main emphasis for them, okay, providing for your family is one thing, and I'll do what I have to do that. But everything else, what's the most important thing is learning. So when I'm not doing that, I'm going to be learning, right? I have to help out at home a little bit, whatever. But that's a major difference. Now you're going to tell me there aren't modern Orthodox rabbinic scholars? Not saying that, not at all. They have their own rabbinic scholars. What I'm saying is that for most people, that's not the main focus. Learning's important. But by people, it's also important for what? It's also important having secular knowledge, right? In the ultra-Orthodox community, you'll get that later. You'll get whatever you need for whatever livelihood, you get that later, right? Because after a certain point in school, you're not going to get that, right? You get a little bit of math, a little bit of English. Here, you get less English. You get a little bit of math, that's it, right? So you're going to say, how are they going to know how to do anything? How are they ever going to, make a living? It's not based on university. That's one of the biggest lies out there. Plenty of people never went to college, made money and survived because, for other reasons, it had nothing to do with college, right? But not even getting into that. The point, the point is that what's the focus? The focus in the ultra-Orthodox community, at least by the men for sure, right, is learning, is Torah scholarship. That's the most important thing, right? And basically, you're going to try and sit and learn as long as possible. And then, a person may have to get a job and do something, provide for their family, okay, right? But being in the secular world, the difference is going to be how we view it. That's another major difference. But, in the ultra-Orthodox community, I'm going to combine Chabad and Hasidic community as well. You have to be live in this world. And by living in this world, okay, I have no choice. I have to be around people. You have to make a living. So you try and do it the most modest way, however it is. And in the end, that's what it is. It's a means to an end. We're not looking at the secular world as like, wow, one day, we're going to spend time and go to the Met, right? We're gonna go see art. Maybe one day we'll go to the opera. We'll see. Well, not today, but we'll see opera. Maybe we'll go to a ball game. In the modern Orthodox community, nothing wrong with it, right? Well, what's the problem with going to a ball game, right? We had a whole show on that. Going to a ball game, watching a movie. By them, there's no contradiction. Again, obviously, as long as it's clean. Right, but for them, there's no contradiction. Why do I have to be so insular? Why in the world can I enjoy that? Right, but that's a major difference. For an ultra-Orthodox Jew, the secular world in general is pure poison. You're going to say, come on, that's fanatical. That is absolutely fanatical. How can you not live in the secular world? We live in a very secular world. That's true, right? People have to work. People have to provide. That's true. You come in contact with all kinds of different people. So people say you got to be open-minded. Come on, all these different things. But what's our focus? You got to remember what the focus of a Jew is. The focus of a Jew is to do what God wants, right? To live the way the Torah says. Just like in the beginning of Derech Hashem, right? In the way of God, he says, why did God create the world? He was a meitiv. God wants to give his goodness. And he wants us to enjoy this world. How are we supposed to enjoy this world? We're supposed to enjoy this world in one very simple way, by doing what God says. Whether I understand it fully, I don't understand it fully, there are laws of modesty, there are laws of speech, there are laws of everything, right? Everything covered in everyday life, right? Comes along, so what about the modern Orthodox? Okay, some are more stringent, some are less stringent, but they're not going to say, most of them will not say, what, you think the secular world is bad? What are you, square? What? I can't enjoy a good Broadway show? I can't go to a ball game? What's the problem? They see a value in that. I think it's a skewed value. I don't think there's any question. I grew up with sports, being a sports fanatic. But, they see it as a value. We see it as a waste of time. What am I getting? Okay, so now, you can't go to any sporting events, right? So you can be a fan. Someone just told me, before I got on about, he could have been a fan, watching the game, live or whatever, but the person didn't do it. But it's not the same. Certainly not the same. I'm not saying it's not enjoyable, right? Listen, I watched the Boston Celtics and hate them as much as they want. 1984, watched them win the championship. Nothing, it was unbelievable. But what does it mean? Nothing. Did it benefit me in life? Did I gain from it in spiritual terms? Certainly not. I can give you 100 reasons why, but that's not the topic. So their value system, even though it's based on Torah, right? 100% it's based on Torah. It's skewed. Now, I want to tell you a scary statistic because I want to show you how far it goes. So I started out being religious in the Modern Orthodox religious Zionist community. Now, in the religious Zionist community, they say they share a lot of the same values. The difference is that they're very, very Zionistic. Modern Orthodox community also very, very Zionistic. Like, for some of them, there's one mitzvah. The mitzvah is the land of Israel, building up the land of Israel, living in the land of Israel. Okay, it's a mitzvah. I'm not going to say it's not an important mitzvah. Not everyone can live in the land, right? The Chaim tried to get to Israel, didn't get there. Vilna Gaon didn't get there, right? It's a good thing if a person can do it, right? But if you can't do it, what are you going to tell me? You transgressed the Torah prohibition. It's an obligation if you can do it, right? There are good reasons why a person doesn't have to leave. Doesn't have to leave outside of Israel, right? He's got if he learns better, he's got parnasa, he's got livelihood. There are a number of reasons, right? You're not going to say, he's going to fry now forever because he didn't live in the land. If the excuse not to live in the land is valid, okay, right? He's got an excuse, but that's not the only mitzvah in the Torah. So by some of them, right? Certainly by some of them, that's their only mitzvah, not all of them. But it goes beyond. It goes way beyond. What should be? It's a mitzvah like any other mitzvah. That's one thing. So I'll tell you the following story. So I grew up. I shouldn't say grew up. I became religious through the religious Zionist Modern Orthodox community, and one of the rabbis I learned under many years ago, I saw the bris. I saw the circumcision about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Something like that. And what does he do now? He is a, what do you call it? He's a spiritual mentor. He's a mashgiach in a yeshiva for Modern Orthodox boys, right? He's like a spiritual mentor there. That's how I would define it. So he told me offhand, off the cuff, he said that in the Modern Orthodox community, this is 4 years ago. He said in the Modern Orthodox community, he said, boys, he deals with, boys coming out of high school or in the middle of college, right, that come to learn in yeshiva for a year or two, and then they go back. And he told me, he said, someone who went to a Modern Orthodox school in America, Modern Orthodox yeshiva in America, He told me 1 in 4 stays religious. That's a 75% dropout rate. He said this off the cuff. So, and then he said, well, if we know he's the Gabbai, of the minyan, meaning like he organized everyone getting there and different things, at least we know he prays. He'll probably pray 3 times a day. So I heard that. I said, well, that's pretty scary. I mean, in the Outer Orthodox community, we have our own dropout rate. It's not 75%, not even 20%. I don't even think it's 10%. I mean, there is a dropout rate. I'm not going to say not. A lot of reasons, not the topic for now. But when I heard that, that's a pretty scary thing. Now, I can understand, since I saw it, and I changed groups because I was afraid of how my kids would turn out being in that type of community. So I saw from within, again, it's not every community, right? I saw a more lax community, let's say. There are much stronger communities. I'm not saying not. But I was terrified what my kids would look like. So I left, and people said this, people said that. And I said, okay, if I don't like it, I'll leave. I went to an Ultra Orthodox community. That was 28 years ago, still there. So there's a major, major difference in philosophy, right? A huge difference, right? Again, I'm not saying they're not religious. I'm not saying they don't keep Shabbos, right? I'm not saying that, right? But the way they view it and what comes out later, radically different. Radically different. They're looking at the secular world. The former president of Yeshiva University said, when you make the blessing in the morning, Lasoik b'divrei Torah, that we're going to engage in learning Torah. Right? We say that in the morning. He said you can make that blessing in secular studies. I don't think a lot of people would agree with that. I'm not saying secular studies, poo-poo, never learn anything. Just keep your head in the books and you'll live. It doesn't work that way. A person believes that, is going to live on miracles. If he's holding there, fine. God will help him. If he's certainly not holding there, which is most people, it's a disaster. Doesn't mean I have to go to college? No. But it means over here that the philosophy is radically different. Radically different. So that being said, that's the difference, a major difference between the modern Orthodox and the Outer Orthodox. Right now, what about Chabad and Hasidim? We'll lump them together. So they think like the Outer Orthodox. Chabad, their big thing is outreach. They don't necessarily dress black and white, but they're pretty much more like the Outer Orthodox, certainly. Hasidim the same way. The difference is, by the Hasidim, most of them work. Most of them, they'll learn maybe a couple years after they're married. That's it. In the Outer Orthodox community, totally different story, right? Many people try and learn as much as they can. Their wives will work, and when they can't do it anymore, the husband has to get a job, okay, right? But in the Outer Orthodox, in the Hasidic community, not that way. So in the Hasidic community, versus the Outer Orthodox community, they're really considered Outer Orthodox. There are differences how they dress. They'll have longer coats, furry hats, fur hats, etc. Okay, right? But, the secular world, okay, they're in the secular world. They are very, very strict in modesty, right? You'll see a lot of them just, if they're in the street or they're walking around, they don't look up for anything because they want to, control their eyes. You tell me, wow, shouldn't the Outer Orthodox community be the same way? 100%. But most things, we are closer to them, certainly philosophically, much, much closer than to the other side, right? So those are the basic groups and the differences. Now, I want to get to one other thing, one other thing, which is, it's also a major thing, and that is that now, if you have differences of opinion, right, you can have, rabbis can have differences of opinion. There are questions, they can have different opinion in Jewish law, maybe, philosophical outlook, different things, but they can have difference of opinion. When it comes to their students, the students are, obviously going to take the side of their Rebbe. It can get nasty, and it doesn't have to, right? The rabbis can disagree, but it doesn't have to be like, fights in the street, and it's unfortunate. It's been that way. in different circumstances. But again, we're much closer together in so many different things than being further away. Now, the other thing is, what's the deal with, okay, rabbis are going to disagree, and you're allowed to disagree, but you have to be respectful. Now, why is it there are people out there, rabbis included, right, that they'll say, we have a list. We have a list, 10, 12, 15 rabbis. We have a list of these rabbis we can't listen to. Forbidden to listen to. Why is it forbidden to listen to them? They're heretics. Right? And they'll plaster all these things about them and what they say, etc., to show that they're heretics. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because they want to make sure people don't listen to them. They don't want to make sure they're caught up in the charisma of some of these people. The person is going to listen to them because these people are treif. Why are they treif? Because they go against what God says. So you're going to tell me, okay, I've seen students of these people, other people, they plaster it all over the place, all over social media. They'll make fun of these people. They're allowed to. I don't have any issue whatsoever. According to Chaim, mentioned this many times in Shmiras HaLashon, the laws of Lashon Hara, someone's a heretic, plaster it. I can plaster them all over the place. I could also make sure he doesn't make a living. I can force them into poverty. That's how far it goes. Because they're causing other people to go astray. We don't want people like this around that are infecting the masses. Now, if that 100% is true, and I'm not arguing the point, if that is 100% the truth, and these are what these people are saying, which I'm not denying in any way, shape, or form. If that's what they're saying, okay, right? People have to be warned. Now, if the rabbis are doing it, they put it up all over the place, good. No sweat off my back, no problem. If you get students or other people that don't know very much about Judaism, and they're wasting their time, right? Mark my words, they are wasting time plastering this stuff all over the place. Okay, you want to dedicate half an hour, 40 minutes. You want to give charity in that aspect, and you want to put it out there, go ahead. The rest of the time, you should be learning, right? I saw someone put up a video. I mentioned this, I mentioned one of my Q&As. That was my whole Q&A, basically. That person put up a video, and he quoted something from Shulchan Aruch, from the Code of Jewish Law. And he said, according to this, well, I'll say what he said. He said that women, whether they're married or not, do not have to cover their hair. Now, according to Jewish law, that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Comes along, commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, and they say, no, that only applies to married women. They disagree. So this person quoted it. Okay, very impressive, but every Hebrew word he butchered, 100% butchered. It shows he can barely read Hebrew. But okay, he put it out there. Now, if he lived in a Jewish community, he would have seen hundreds, thousands of girls not married with their hair uncovered. But he's going to go jump up and down. He's going to say, but this is what the Shulchan Aruch says. But anyone who knows how to learn, this moron doesn't know how to learn. If he doesn't know how to learn, shut your mouth, because that's not the custom. Right? In Yemen, the girls covered their hair. I get it. They want to show they were married or taken or whatever, so no one would take them. So that I get. In the vast majority of any ultra Orthodox neighborhood I've ever lived in or been in, I've never seen a single woman cover her hair in public. Doesn't exist. So now you want to give a class on Jewish law. You want to quote this. You never lived in a Jewish community. If you lived in a Jewish community, you would have asked the question, why don't we hold like the Shulchan Aruch? Why don't we go like the Code of Jewish Law? Since you don't know anything, right? You can barely read Hebrew. You butchered every single word. What are you quoting it for? Go sit and learn. Why are you wasting my time? So what's my issue? Right? So I know I got at least 45 minutes, so I'm going to keep going. What's my issue? My issue is that, I understand it's a big thing to warn people. And you have to warn people are heretics. I get it, 100%. I don't disagree. But people who should really be learning, then doing this more than they're doing it, they're wasting time. Right? Again, you want to dedicate an hour. You want to dedicate an hour a day. Let's say you got 3 hours to learn. I'm going to dedicate an hour. Person's going to dedicate an hour all over Facebook. Keep plastering. Okay, I'll give you an hour. I'm generous. I'm in a good mood. Right? But the other 2 hours, you better be sitting and learning. Now you're going to tell me I can't even learn that much. I listen to videos, but I space out in different things. There are better things to do with your time. I understand these people are heretics. I understand they shouldn't be listened to. But why in the world are you doing that? So people have an issue. And they'll say it's all about hate. It's all about anger. Right? Say that about me also. Why do you scream? It's all about anger. What are you angry about? Right? But, people get excited. People want to hear the truth. People are passionate. It's not anger. It's passion. Right? I do have anger considering what the conservative movement did to my family and everything else. Okay. Right? But it's really based on passion. So I understand the passion. Right? But the passion comes to a point. And the point of passion is, you want to use it well, but the evil inclination comes along and says, you know what? What are you worried about? You want to learn a little bit, fine, but I want you to do these other things. Right? I want you to be busy doing these other things. And what happens? Then you end up learning less because you're too busy doing these other things. You're fighting God's war. Right? I know someone on social media, that's all he does. Fights with people who don't agree with him. Don't agree with Torah. I told him once. I said, let God fight his own war. He doesn't need you. He goes, no, it's a mitzvah. And what? Sit and learn. That's what you have to do. Right? That's your obligation. You want to be the best Jew or Jew wannabe? That's what you have to do. Crack the books. Crack social media. You want to be a part of it. You want to spread the word. You want people to see these videos. Okay, up to a point. But people get ticked off. Right? People get ticked off and say, oh, it's all about anger. It's all about bullying these people. It's not about bullying these people. These people are forbidden to listen to. Right? If they're heretics, you flush them. 100%. Right? But I think, again, it's my own personal opinion. You can take it for what it's worth. I think there should be a limit. Okay, you get it out there, spread it. How much should I spread it? That's the question. Let the rabbis do what they want. People who are going to listen to these rabbis, you want to listen? Okay, right? I don't have an issue with that either. The issue is how much you're putting the pedal to the metal and learning, and how much you're doing this other stuff. You want to do it? Fine. Half an hour, 40 minutes. You want to dedicate a certain amount of time? What's the rest of the time? The rest of the time is to be learning. Because if God forbid, someone makes a video. And what's the first part of the video this guy did? He butchered some of these people. Okay, I don't have an issue with that. But then he said, I want to tell you halacha. I want to give a class on Jewish law. And he butchered himself and made him sound like an idiot because if you know what Jewish law says, this person's full of it. He's full of it because he quoted something that the commentaries say we don't hold that way. And we don't do it that way. So he took something out of context. It doesn't matter if that's what it said, but you have to see the bigger picture. When you see the bigger picture, you can say something. If you don't see the bigger picture, don't quote it to me. Because I'm going to ram it down your throat. And I'm going to show you you're wrong. And you're wrong because, you quoted it, but okay, what do the commentaries say? Well, I don't know. I can't read it. If you can't read it, what are you quoting it for? So, no, I got this halacha, this novelty, unbelievable. Girls walk around not married with their hair covered. Really? Not my neighborhood. Not in other neighborhoods I've been in. Unless they're married, they'll cover their hair. If they're not married, except in Yemen, right? And maybe there's some Sephardic girls cover their hair. I haven't seen it. When I say I haven't seen it, again, you want to find somewhere that may do that? So the majority, for sure, nothing to talk about. You're going to quote something, quote it right. Right? So, so the crux of the issue in this point, is, it's not about hate. People look at these rabbis, it's all about hate. It's all about doom and gloom. They want people to repent. They want people to change. Okay, scare tactics are good. If it works with Sephardic people, for sure, right? It's certainly good. They don't want to fry in hell forever. They want to understand what they're up against. They want to understand the truth. But you can't understand the truth, and this is really the point. You can never understand the truth if you don't listen to the right people. If you listen to the wrong people, repeat after me. Yiskadav v'yiskadash. That's the mourner's prayer. You're out. It's over. Because they're going to lead you down a slippery slope, and you're going to say, there's no problem. You do something wrong, God's going to have infinite mercy. Of course God's going to have infinite mercy. You're okay. You desecrate Shabbos in public? You're supposed to be spiritually cut off? No. You're okay. Homosexuality? I understand. You've been that way since you're 3. I get it. I understand. The other Orthodox is going to be upset with me. They're going to say, what about, Leviticus chapter 18? Yeah, I know they're going to be upset. But what do you say to this person? It's forbidden. That's what you say. It's forbidden. Got to work on it. See, psychologists. I mean, there are psychologists out there, that can help these type of people. But for goodness sakes, I can't whitewash it. I can't say it's okay. So, if a person's got thousands of followers, somebody says that, what do you say? What do you say? You say that you can't listen to this person because that's heresy. You're a warmonger. I love what he says. This he can't say. You cannot say it. It's an abomination. I don't care how they grew up. It's irrelevant. I feel bad for them. I empathize with them. It's certainly not normal. We see in this week's Parsha, God says a man has to cling to his wife, not to another guy. We understand it's forbidden. I understand it's bad. I understand it's a desire and a bad desire, whatever. It's not natural. Doesn't matter. You got to say it's forbidden. You don't say it's forbidden. How can you call yourself an Orthodox Jew? How can you have thousands of followers? Somebody like that, you ban him. And you speak against him. And you say this person has no right to say it, and he's wrong. And 100%, I agree, and I'll say it right here. He's wrong. 100% wrong. And that's the wrong message, that should be given. It's not the only bad thing this person said. Right? But there's reason. It's not about warmongering. That's not what it's not all about doom and gloom and hate. It's about helping people raise themselves up, to understand the depths of the Torah, what it means not to have bad thoughts, what it means not to steal, not even to covet. How can you not covet? How can God command me not to be covet? How can God command me on Sukkot to be happy when we're living in crazy times? Right? But that's still what I have to do. And someone says, nah, don't worry about it. It's okay. God's going to understand. No, God's not going to understand. Because if you're doing something that egregious, I cannot just whitewash it and say, okay, that's fine. Somebody like that, you flush them down the toilet. You heard it right here. You flush them. Why? Because I don't care what they say. I don't care how much they know. I don't care about Kabbalah. I care about anything else. They can have a 250 IQ. The bottom line is, people like that you can't listen to. They're going to lead you down the wrong path. So if someone comes out and says, this person is trafe, right? You can't listen to him. And he's got a list of people and they're saying heretical, crazy things. Don't listen to them. You can't listen to them, right? If all that is true. I'm not saying it's not true, right? You got to investigate it yourself. But if someone's going to say, I guess I'll end with this because I'm over, right? But, if someone's going to say, well, don't worry about it. God's going to look the other way. And, punishment's not going to be that severe. I don't know. It sounds pretty bad. It depends how you did it. It depends your intention. Depends on a lot of things, right? But how far do we go to say that God has compassion? No, you got to understand. Look how this kid grew up. He was playing with dolls all his life. What, you didn't think he was going to change? You thought he was just going to stay the same? He's going to marry a woman? He's messed up, right? That's where he's holding. God's going to hold him accountable. So even if he's got a bad gene, I got a lot of bad genes. I can tell you, a lot of bad genes, right? But God's going to say, okay, you have them. I want you to work on them. I want you to change. And these genes, these bad genes, bad character traits, whatever they are, some have more of it, some less, some in this area, some in that area. God says, I don't want you to act on it. You don't give a free pass. You don't say, okay, just because he's playing with dolls since he was a little kid, that's how he's brought up. This is how he ended up. You can't hold that against him. So God is going to have compassion. I don't see it that way. Others certainly don't see it that way. That's heresy. That's absolutely heresy 101. Somebody like that, put him on a list, and you tell people, I don't care what this person knows. It doesn't matter. I don't care how many followers he's got. That's somebody you can't listen to, right? That's it. So, how much a person should really, be plastering this stuff all over the place, okay, that we can have a discussion, right? How far it should go. But the main focus, should be on my own personal growth, on my own personal, learning. This sounds like a lot of fun, bashing people and calling people names. Sounds like a tremendous amount of fun, even if it's permissible, right? Even if it's permissible. But there has to be a limit. Because if there's not a limit, you're going to be held liable later, right? Certainly, if you're a Jew, what are you doing? You're wasting time. You're wasting precious time you could have been learning. If you're not going to be learning anyway, it's one thing, right? If you have certain potential, God's going to say, why did you reach your potential? Say, I was too busy on Instagram. I was doing your will. I was too busy on Facebook plastering people all over the place who are heretics. God said that's beautiful. Unbelievable. But why didn't you spend more time learning, less time doing that? You can still do it. You can still donate a certain amount of time. Why are you wasting so much time? That's the issue, right? And again, it's not about hate, right? It's not about warmongering. It's not about just putting people down. If people come out and claim to be Orthodox and look Orthodox, and they have tens of thousands of followers, they are a menace. They are a menace that people have to be warned. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with putting people on a list. I don't have an issue with that. Other people may say, come on, it's all about hatred. It's all about doom and gloom. They want people to grow. They want people to learn, to learn Muslim, to understand what it means. When you don't do that and you listen to the wrong people, everything's good. Even the greatest of every, you transgressed? Don't worry about it. God's going to have mercy, right? Go have a cheeseburger. God will understand. If I were playing God, put on my George Burns glasses, funny mustache, I'd be wiping people out left and right. Because why would I stand for this? Why in the world would I stand for this? If someone's got that kind of influence, people coming out of Christianity, and you're leading down a certain path. Again, charisma, Torah, giving things over. It can be tremendously charismatic. Doesn't matter. Can have a tremendous amount of knowledge. Can also be a heretic, right? And if he's a heretic, you stay away. Isn't that pleasant? Isn't everyone happy they're here today?
Absolutely.
Wait a minute, I'm not done yet.
I know you're not. I have a question for you. So this is from Janice Hart, brought up a good point. I won't read it verbatim, but I'll just kind of tell you the concept. So why is it that some sects of Judaism, that when it comes to milk and meat, the dairy, some of them they can wait. They have to wait 6 hours. And some of them only an hour. It's almost what she said. Why are there differences in agreements?
If you came from Amsterdam, they have a custom of an hour. I have a son-in-law. They have German descent, so they wait 3 hours. The prevalent custom is 6 hours. Why? Because the question Talmud asked, how long do you have to wait between milk and meat? Right. So one opinion was actually 24 hours. Right. Another opinion was from today to whenever you ate to the next meal. So the question is, what's the time frame to the next meal? The time frame to the next meal certainly could be, definitely more than 3 hours, right? It certainly could be, right? A person ate breakfast early. When's the next meal? 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whatever. That's 6 hours, right? So that was the question, right? That was the question that the Talmud addresses. How, when is the next meal? How long is that? Is in between, right? So the prevalent custom, unless there are other customs, the prevalent custom is 6 hours, Now, normally you're going to say, why should it be so long? Right? There could be a person eats meats, right? You get meat stuck in your teeth or whatever. It's there for a while. How'd they know 6 hours? Okay, it's a good question. Right? But according to others, that time frame is a shorter time frame. Right? So the answer is, okay, so how do you know what to do? Let's say you're about tshuva like me. How do you know what to do? So you go according to the prevalent custom, unless you have, let's say you have family, you have, your great grandparents or whoever, let's say, came from a certain place and they held 3 hours, right? That community held 3 hours. Okay, depends where your genealogy comes from. If you don't have a genealogy, you don't have a pedigree, like someone who's gonna convert. They don't have a pedigree, so they'll go according to what everyone else does. They say, but I want to hold 3 hours. It's only an option if you had family that grew up in that place. That's the only option. You can't say, I'm going to take the more lenient opinion, right? That's certainly you're not allowed to do. If your family had a custom, it's one thing. They don't have a custom, you do what everyone else, you go according to the majority. And the majority holds 6 hours, right? My daughter, recently married, who, married someone of, German descent. She's like, that's a benefit. I only have to wait 3 hours, between meat and milk. So I said, well, if you were like me, just eat bittersweet chocolate. She's like, I don't have to eat bittersweet chocolate. I can eat milk chocolate. Milk chocolate is better. I said, okay, but I can still eat chocolate. Even if you don't like it, I can still eat chocolate. So that's that would be the reason for that.
There's also a question regarding how is it to some people in the Jewish community will basically just be more strict in general but they're still considered Orthodox. Now I'm just telling you what I'm reading. I'm not telling you what I've experienced. So you have different groups of Orthodox. Some will even drive to their synagogue if there's a reason to, or some of them will use Zoom because of the pandemic. They can't go there, so they do use electricity.
It's a problem. It's a problem because even if you can't get to synagogue, right? Even if you can't get to synagogue, you're transgressing, a million times by driving. Mm. That's not about being lenient or being, you say, well, I can't get to synagogue, that's the only way. The conservative movement said, if you're going to drive, only go to synagogue, but that went out the window, right? We don't hold you allowed to drive, right? You start the engine, fire, all kinds of different things, right? Hundreds of prohibitions. How can they be lenient? I'll give you another example. One thing I didn't talk about was how women dress, right? Let's say in a modern Orthodox community, you can have women that cover their hair with a baseball cap. Now, there's only one problem. Most of the hair is sticking out. If the command is to cover all the hair, that you shouldn't have any hair showing. If it happened, a woman's hair came, a little bit of hair came out, a tefach, a fist, right? A tefach is a handbreadth, right? If that amount of hair came out, we're not gonna, she's not gonna get slaughtered, right? But you're not allowed, okay, then you have to cover it. But so someone asked me, I see all these women, they wear different types of hats, berets, but half the hair is uncovered. They said, how are they allowed to do that? I said, they're not. They said, but why do they do it? Because they think they're covering their hair. they think that, at least they're doing something, but their hair is uncovered. I said, I get it. Their hair is uncovered. Right? They're going to say, well, they're more lenient. How can they be? That's forbidden. There's a difference between holding a lenient position and something that is forbidden. Right? In the open Orthodox, they'll just mention that the first woman they called a maharat. They didn't want to call her a rabbi, so they called her a maharat. So I saw a video, first time she spoke, and the people there, they scanned, people in the crowd, and yeah, women weren't dressed appropriately. They didn't have their hair covered, right? A lot of them wore pants, other things, whatever, right? So okay, so you see, it's a joke, but. I have to explain why a woman does that? I don't have to explain that. She has to answer for herself. She's going to say, well, the halakha is not to cover all your hair. That's not true. Right? So how can they be lenient? Why do people smoke? Why are people overweight? Right? When it comes to Jewish law, you cannot turn it into a pretzel. How can a person leave their hair uncovered? I don't know. in a conservative synagogue, they have, I think it's kind of funny, they have what they call a doily. A doily is like something made out of, it's like satin or whitish or a grayish or whatever, and it's got holes in it. So what do women do? They come in synagogue and they put it on. Like they're covering their hair, like they're wearing a yarmulke, like they're wearing a skull cap. If they're going to cover their hair, it's see-through. Mm-hmm. Doesn't cover the whole hair, right? It's kind of like an Orthodox synagogue I saw that had a mechitza, had a separation between men and women, and it was big enough, it was tall enough, fulfilled all the obligations. There was only one issue. What was the issue? It was plexiglass. It's a separation, isn't it? Yeah, but I thought I was in a hockey rink. I wanted to deck someone in the board. It was actually kind of funny, right? But it's doesn't fulfill the obligation of a mechitza 100%. The problem is, if women are sitting there, I can see right through them. So what's the point of having a separation if I can see the women? Well, it's a benefit. I can see the women, but that's not what you're in synagogue for. That's why there's a separation, so I can concentrate on prayer. Right? Mm-hmm. So, be relying on leniency as a person can, for certain things. I don't know why, right? As an open Orthodox, how in the world could they rely on using Zoom? You're going to tell me it's left on, they don't change it, whatever. There are different possible ways to get around certain things, right? But in the spirit of it, 100%. Okay, so you daven at home, you pray at home. You're stuck at home, you can't pray anywhere. So what, but it's very important. Prayer is rabbinical. To pray, according to the Rambam and others, there's a mitzvah to pray. All the prayers, the times, it's all rabbinical. So you're going to say, so it's all rabbinical, I can be lenient. No. If it's rabbinical, even if it's rabbinical, who says I have such a strong obligation in the first place? I still have to do it. I'm not saying, it's rabbinical, so we just don't do it. Right? But I'm pointing out that the time, the prayers themselves, all these things, if they're on a rabbinic level, then why am I using Zoom to pray with 10 people? Forget about whether I fulfill my obligation. Why am I doing something forbidden, in a way that I don't I don't have to? It's not only I don't have to, right? It doesn't, it doesn't do anything over here, because the bottom line is I do have an obligation to pray. That's for sure, according to the Torah. If everything else is rabbinical, why in the world am I transgressing over here, possibly Torah prohibitions, to fulfill something that's rabbinical? Good question, isn't it? It's a contradiction in terms. So you're going to say, no, but God really wants me to pray in synagogue, so I'm going to drive. But now you just transgressed 150,000, transgressions of the laws of Shabbos. But God wants me to pray. These are all Torah prohibitions. You're talking about prayer, which is rabbinical. Right? Let that sink in. It's not the end all. I understand people want to pray. I understand about, camaraderie and all that, being close to God, getting in a rhythm. I get it, but you cannot turn the Torah into a pretzel. You can't just do whatever you want, and that's exactly what Rabbi Feldman came out against. And he said you cannot make such a barrier. You cannot you cannot destroy something that's fundamental. I understand Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, whatever it was, is important. But if you can't go to synagogue, you can't go to synagogue. And you're exempt. You can't pray with 10 people, so you pray at home. You do the best you can at home. No, but I want to be around people. You cannot change things that can't be changed. It's forbidden. There is no, I'm going to be lenient over here. It's either permitted or it's not. Right? If there's a doubt, okay. Something else. This is not a doubt. This is not, I'll just be lenient. I'll just do this. Coffman's law, whether you like it or not, Coffman's law is either you do it right or don't bother. If you're going to turn the Torah into a pretzel, I promise you, I'll curse you, it'll never stick. You'll never do it because you cut corners on a million different things, and if you want to pass it down to your kids, never happen. Because you do a little bit like this and a little bit like that, and it's all a hodgepodge. That's it. You'll never be able to pass that down, right? And I'm not saying that's the only reason, right? But, you have to be consistent. The whole point over here, my yelling and screaming, is you have to be within parameters. If you're not within the parameters, okay. So then you tell me I'm not in the parameters, I pick and choose. I'm not really Orthodox. Okay. Right? Should I try and convince you why you should be Orthodox? Maybe. Whatever the case is, doesn't matter. But if I know you're not within the parameters, I'm not going to argue with you in general.
So it's important to learn which laws supersede other ones.
If you're going to tell me it's permissible, if you're going to tell me I can rely on a leniency, that's something else. That's something totally different.
Gotcha. So learning the importance of which laws do supersede others, just like if I told my son.
So you have to know.
Right.
You have to know what supersedes something else. In other words, going to synagogue on Shabbos is rabbinical. Driving your car is a Torah prohibition. Many Torah prohibitions every second. Right? If you're driving 30 miles, you are in deep trouble. Deep trouble. You have to know when things supersede. When it comes to Shabbos, I'll give one example. When it comes to Shabbos, pikuach nefesh. What's pikuach nefesh? Saving a life. Saving a life supersedes Shabbos. Right? But again, if I can minimize desecration, okay. If I can't, it supersedes it. But you have to know when. You have to know where. And, you have to know what you're doing. And if you don't, you have to ask. Right? You have to ask a competent rabbinical authority. You can't just make it up. You can't just make it up on your own. But there are times, and as the Ramchal said, in Derech Hashem, he brings down that the rabbis are given the ability even to uproot something from the Torah. Now, he says uproot, meaning, we'll give an example, by shofar blowing. You're not allowed to blow the shofar on Shabbos. The rabbis say you're not allowed to blow it on Shabbos. You're not allowed to shake a lulav on Shabbos. Right? So says the Ramchal, they're uprooting something from the Torah. That's only in a case by what we call sheval tase. I sit, I don't do anything. Right? What does it mean I'm sitting and not doing anything? I don't blow the shofar. As much as I want to blow the shofar, right, the rabbis say don't do it. Right? So I say, okay, I pass. Right? Whoever knows how to blow the shofar, they don't blow it. They get a free pass. Why do they get a free pass? Because they listen to the rabbis. Right? But they're not doing it actively to uproot it. They're just not doing it. That's a major difference. Right? They're not blowing the shofar. By not blowing the shofar, you'll tell me it's circumventing, maybe, but it's not uprooting because I'm not doing something by action. That's what the Ramchal said. It's not by action. What is it about? It's about not doing something. Not doing something is very different than actively doing something. That's the difference.
Okay, very good. Well, that's going to wrap us up. Rabbi?
Wait a minute, I got another 20 minutes. My name is Singer.
If you were a singer.
Look, I have the same here.
You're funny.
No fair.
Yeah,
no
funny.
fair. It's your show. Okay.
Bias treatment.
I'm done.
Very good. All right,
I only come for entertainment purposes.
You are the entertainment. All right.
The Energizer entertainer.
There you go.
See me at 11.
Funny. All right, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. See you same time, same place next week, Hashem willing. Shalom, everybody.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב